Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio here at the ENTSO-E annual conference, very aptly called Connecting the Dots. I'm now joined by Laurent Schmitt, who is the Secretary General of ENTSO-E. And Laurent, always a pleasure. Welcome. I'm going to kick it off because to the start of this conference, you gave out a few quotes, and one of them was that power grids have to remain neutral from commercial activity, yet everybody's talking about markets and market design and so on. It'd be quite nice for you to sort of embellish on what you actually meant by that, because sometimes the soundbite can be taken maybe a bit out of context or needs a bit more meaning to it.
Yeah, I think we are now the clean energy package discussion are coming to maturity with I would say we are very close to the finalization of the trilogues, and I think the clarity of the various elements of it is definitely improving. So what we see is we see a new market design emerging from there, and I think at ENTSO-E and with our TSO member, we are very attached to the fact that if we want to move along that market scenario, which we fully support, we must recognize that the role of grid operators has to be a neutral role, and has to be a facilitator roles across the entire resources which come into the system. So Mr. Karins again mentioned today on the importance of working on principle of balancing responsible party to all the resources being connected into the system. That's one of the very important elements. And I made these statements in the context where we do recognize that we need to go into further partnership with DSOs and managing in a coordinated manner what happens on the transmission and the distribution. However, all DSOs today don't have the same business model, and some are kind of still tightly connected with commercial activities, while we see others moving into more independency. So I think I wanted to make that case. It's great to do market facilitation together, to facilitate integration of resources, to maybe in the future do adequacy calculation and so on, but that fundamentally should be made in an environment which is neutral and agnostic to the technology which gets into our systems.
And so are you then saying that actually what we need to do is build because there are two things, right? There's the market design, then there is the control technology that goes over it, and then there's the physical infrastructure. Yes. So someone has to pay for the physical infrastructure and the control technology, and then we get the market design. But one of those things which you've said in the past and other people have said, that actually we need to anchor on the right outcome in terms of our market design. Yeah. And you've talked a lot about capacity and flexibility in the past. Are we finally getting to a point where we're actually focusing on capacity and flexibility? Because everything else is kind of, I don't want to belittle the challenge, but it's solvable by technology. Yeah. But getting a flexibility and capacity design, that's a big job.
I would say we have the right elements of the equation on the table, and I think we are exchanging with various stakeholders on the way forward. We think our network codes are already bringing some innovation to facilitate this flexibility and so on. We recognize that we'll need further dialogue, and I think the clean energy package sets a good direction for that dialogue, both on the capacity side, where there is a recognition that capacity markets are a possibility into some areas, but we need to look at capacity not only in countries but also at regions and pan-European. And when it comes to flexibility, the role of balancing responsible party, balancing markets, management of congestion redispatch into our system, because our system gets more and more congested and constrained, and the element of the DSO having to manage his own level of congestion. So I think we have the right element of this design on the table now, and we are really ready to work on the engineering of that design. We should not forget what we hear into that event as well is the need of building still the physical infrastructure, and the fact that we are today in our European project of common interest list over 150 billions of construction of physical infrastructure line, which is not directly related to market design. The business cases of these lines are justified, and here we are really into a process of getting the society engaged and accepting these lines for the benefit of the pan-European system. So there is really two agendas currently. One is market design, which drives more towards digital, and optimization of the current system as it is, constrain congestions. And the second element is continue the building of the infrastructure, because it's not understood very well by everyone, and I highlighted this into the interview. Renewable is good, it's cheap, provided it is in an area of the system which is either sunny or windy. And so that's not necessarily where you have the smart cities or the consumer or the prosumer. So I think that balance has to be recognized.
Well, the last time we talked, you said that there's a vision where someone in Barcelona can be consuming the energy from a Danish wind turbine, and we need to, that physical layer needs to underpin all of this. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Which was also an interesting angle in this interview I mentioned earlier on, where you're starting to then think about how do you create an economic and governmental and societal consensus to make sure that actually I will accept this transmission line going through I've got one in my backyard, but a new one. So when you start looking at things like that, do you not also think though that it isn't all about the transmission line? Because you touched on it from the DSOs. There's a lot of stuff that can be done at the DSO level, learning from transmission operators, how they do congestion management, where there's lots of innovation in the US, where you keep the energy at the edge as much as you can. There's a lot that we can do with technology where we don't just have to jump to transmission lines and infrastructure as well, do we?
So we recognize that trend, and that's why we wanted to have today also a debate about cities, microgrids, and basically recognizing that new technology are coming at the edge. So fundamentally the question is, what should be the services to be provided by grid operators to these technology suppliers or community? And in a nutshell, I would say a grid operator is a kind of an insurance company and guaranteeing 99.99 security of supply. And it has various tools to do this. One of them is building infrastructure, others in giving incentive controls to all these distributed elements. And I think what we are trying to do is constantly revisit our business model to define what to offer to these new communities. And the economics are on one side positive against for renewable, but on the other side, having communities which are absolutely disconnected for the system. When you have the system available few hundred meters away, it's really not economical. So I'm not talking about microgrids for Africa or developing countries. I'm talking about microgrids into develop system with a grid connection somewhere. And so here then comes the issue of how to connect with a broad system. So we wanted to highlight local level, national level, and regional discussion up to the pan-European and getting the entire core system.
Because on the most extreme, it's a dangerous economic scenario if you've got, like you said, all these microgrids, and the transmission system is just an insurance policy that gets used once a year. We're never ever going to get the connectivity and internet connectivity based on that model.
Yes, so the question is the once a year. So if you do a very detailed calculation, basically getting this microgrid totally autonomous is much more than once a year. It's probably between 10 and 20% of the time of the year. So that's a lot of time without power. And in the same time, what we heard in these cities and communities, we rather go to the high-end, basically service level agreements with data centers, which naturally goes with high quality of life and so on. So I think we should.
So you become part of the microgrid.
The inherent needs in cities or in a critical infrastructure to have, I would say, 100% reliable quality of supply. I think it is still an inherent element of that infrastructure. And so that's what we have to think about in terms of delivering the service to these players.
So it's all much more joined up. It's no longer as demarked. You're a TSO, I'm a DSO, and you're a microgrid. Everything's got to somehow hang together.
So the question is how to articulate the joint operation of the TSO and the DSO together around the optimization of the power system. So there is some further data exchange and maybe further platform to be built together. So we are very active with the DSOs onto that. and in the same time recognizing that at the edge of the system, basically we have new market players, which are expecting to deliver different kind of services. And when you have a storage, what we heard into this panel, when you have a storage at that level, it's interesting to think how the storage serve the need of an electrical vehicle or a certain grid connection at the very low level into the system, but also potentially interact with a price signal, which is about balancing the national system or even potentially some pan-European reserve. So I think it's all about connecting these systems together, and we think the entire system can work in an integrated way.
Not a small job. Yeah. So tell me another thing, Laurent. You're giving a closing keynote where you're talking about your vision for the energy outlook, right? We're probably not going to release this before that closing keynote. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to say in there and what your vision is as well, because when you first took on this role at ENTSO-E, you were going, it's got to be about data, it's got to be about that digitization piece and how we push that forward. Has that changed at all, or are you just much more committed to it?
No, I think we continue alongside the line of what I said at the beginning on digital. I think we are a bit careful on the digital elements in order not to do digital washing of what we say, and we want to focus on the use cases. So the digital is still very present into our agenda, but coming more through the application of it much more than the beauty of clouds, or which to us is a second. It's just a tool. So that stays. What struck me when I joined this position is the fact that the TSOs and ENTSO-E, we do need to do already a lot of consultation and exchange a lot of view and information across the entire communities being connected with our system to plan the future expansion of our system over the next 10, 20, 30 years. That brings us a very large set of information that obliges us to align some of the visions and so on. And in the meantime, what I'm hearing from various of these players is who has a vision of what the system is going to look like, about the likely scenarios and so on. So with this outlook, we just simply put much more data available to our stakeholders and users of our system in trying for them to make use of this data, not only for us for our own purposes, for building the system, but also for them to calculate business cases for new technology at the grid edge. How much is the system going to have or need flexibility, or certain reserve requirements and all that element. So we really want to be a facilitator of that developments. We want to provide and engage into that dialogue.
So all of this is going to be open data. Anybody can come in.
That's going to be as much open data as what we can. That's going to be shared. We are going to continue into our journey of engaging consultation, discussion with stakeholders. And what we just want is that's moving forward. And we also want to make use of our transparency platform, which is about looking also of where we are today into the pan-European systems in terms of quantity of renewables. And we actually see a lot of players into this system making use of this data. And again, we are regulated entities into all the countries, and ENTSO-E is also under regulatory oversight of Acer. So we are working, I think, for the benefit of the system, for the benefit of the European and national social welfare. So the idea is to really facilitate this sharing of information to create business and reduce cost of dispatching this energy. So that's what we are behind this outlook.
And final question to you is, you must be a bit over a year of doing this now. It's like and what do you think is the burning platform? What do you think is the one thing that everybody should focus on in terms of, and these are my words, like greasing the wheels of this transition? Because we've been talking about the transition. It's coming. It's here. Yeah. We're in it. But what do you think is the burning thing that we should really be lasering in on?
The burning thing for me is the design of the next real-time markets and the management of the suitable price signals so that the entire system and community has data for us to be able to construct the system, but basically also to have these data discovered by the actors connected to our system so that they can make investments to help basically the expansion of that system. And you were mentioning storage or other technology. I think they can contribute to the building up of that future system. So really the cracking this engineering of the next real-time market design is very important. I think we have the right debate and the right element on the table. Now we need to progress onto the design. I think it's not rocket science, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to do it.
It can be done.
Yeah.
Laurent, thank you very much. On that note, we'll leave it. Thank you very much for watching Engerati interview with in association with ENTSO-E at the annual conference, and I think very aptly named Connecting the Dots. Thanks for tuning in.